we on? Oh, good. Good evening. That's your microphone. You're going to need that. Hey, thanks for joining us for our evening. We got started here. We're going. I think it hasn't updated yet, though. Oh, there it is. No?
Did she fade out from the
Okay. There we go. We are going. Technology helps to keep up. So,
it's fine.
we are continuing our walk through the Bible. So if you have a Bible with you, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 11. We're actually going to start at chapter 10, verse 32. And very interesting observation that we made last week that I want to kind of review. What did we talk about? What stories paralleled each other? So what was the...
Like from the very beginning?
Yeah.
Well, the creation of the earth paralleled with them getting off the boat.
Was the flood.
With the flood.
The flood,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be in... Man, this is crazy. Yeah, if I break my mic, my sound guy's going to be mad.
What happened to your little fuzzball thing?
It's right here.
Okay.
It's really good. Yeah, so the creation story mirrors them on the boat.
Oh, on the boat.
Because it was raining.
Oh,
and
it's
says,
the Adam and Eve story that mirrors them off the boat.
Right. The Adam and Eve, you get into the Adam and Eve story, they were told to multiply, be fruitful,
yeah.
multiply, and there was a failure and a curse.
Right.
And so we get those parallels. So then if you're looking at that parallel, what would be the next? This is going to be the end of what we would consider the preface.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to have to go back before I can answer
Why?
that question.
What would be the order? If you had a story that paralleled the creation, you have a story that paralleled you have a story that paralleled the Garden of Eden.
Plus
what
the fall of man
would come? Yeah,
Wait.
You've already covered that.
Yeah, I know.
So Cain and Abel would be what we would follow next. What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
So this would be a place to, that would be the natural, what you would expect the next one to be, right? What are you frustrated about?
I'm not. I'm listening to you. I was trying to talk and tell you, and then you just said it. So
I was just asking.
Your
dad said it. That's why I said it. So we pick up this story from last week. We talked about what? We talked about, hello, Chelsea. Last week we talked about what?
I don't remember.
Oh, good. Noah's getting mad. It was Noah's children, and he cursed Canaan, and he didn't know when to stop. Right?
Right.
Okay, Jonas, we're in the middle of something. You're going to have to go sit down, please. So, Genesis chapter 10, verse 32 picks up this story. There's a reason we're starting here. I'll get to that later. These are the clans of Noah's son, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. We're in Genesis 11. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." And they used bricks instead of stone, and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. And the Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So, what are some things that stick out right there in that story to you, Chelsea? What are some problems that you have?
I mean, why would you build a tower? Whoever would think it would reach the sky?
Yeah, that's a good one. What else? One question that I would have is God scared? Like, is God scared of the ability of people? Like he looks at this and he says, if we don't stop them, they'll be able to do anything. But isn't in the New Testament the statement is through Christ all things are possible? Like, isn't that part of our mission as believers to be able to do anything? So why then in this story is God so adamantly opposed to people being able to accomplish anything?
I don't know.
One pattern that we do see here is the people are becoming more and more Eastern, if that makes sense.
Not really.
From the garden, they head east. They're sent out to the east. And then Cain and Abel, and they wander to the east. And then they've gone too far. And then God brings them back west after the flood. And then from the flood, they begin to scatter out east. And then they head eastward again. And here they've headed further and further east. And God stops them. So they continue to spread out from the garden and from the place they get off the boat. They continue this habit of moving eastward, but we're going to be introduced to a guy here in just a little bit that heads back to the west. Go ahead.
Chapter 11, verse 2 says, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east. They were going west, weren't they?
No, they moved eastward. They moved to the east.
They journeyed from the east?
To the east. I understand. They're moving east. Yes, they're moving east.
How do you know?
The literal translation of that is, are you in the King James Version? From the east, that the literal translation is eastward or towards the east. They're moving towards the east. They're moving eastward. Yes. It is like they're moving east. They're going towards the east to Shinar. Mm-hmm. They found a plane there. What's your question, Lauren? Okay. Ask the question. Go ahead. Yeah. So the challenge of what you're talking about, right? God has told the people to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the whole earth. And God's like, we look at the Tower of Babel as God just confusing people. But a couple of things are happening here, and I love the input of what you're talking about, Lauren, that God had given them this command to be fruitful and multiply and to spread out over all the earth. But they agree on a concept, on a mission, and their mission is to be known by this tower that reaches to heaven. And their intention is to settle. So God's challenge is for them not to settle, not to stop, not to find a place and say this is good enough and together all together. And one of the challenges of that action of settling is you become self-interested. So when they become settled here, when they come and find themselves in a specific place, God is not concerned about what they are doing, but the reason they are doing it. They're afraid to be scattered all over the earth. They're afraid to accomplish the mission that God has given them. And so they want to stay close to what is familiar and be rulers of that space, be in control of that space. Does that sound familiar at all? Does it sound familiar? Like that might be what happens, like, I don't know, for everybody? Yeah.
I thought you meant in reference to what had already happened before, but well, yeah, obviously it sounds familiar to just everyday life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as we're wrapping up the preface, we're just getting this clear understanding of the nature of man. How is this different from the nature of God? How is this activity different from what God is able to do? Or what do you see parallel-wise here? What do you see that parallels between this and the story that we would expect to see, the Cain and Abel story?
Not really sure.
Do you remember Cain's name? It's Cain.
Yes. I don't remember what it meant, though.
It means acquired. To
Oh,
acquire.
that's right. And he acquires the acquirer. So he's the one that's the farmer.
Yes, he's the one. He is doing this work, and this is the work of people. They're trying to acquire the status of God, of lordship over this space.
What does Abel's name mean?
I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
Not important to the story.
Oh, perfect.
So,
okay.
And what was the challenge of Cain? What was his frustration?
That his sacrifice wasn't good enough.
His sacrifice wasn't good enough. So here we find ourselves in this place that this is really about technology. This story, in a lot of ways, it's really about technology and the technological advances of people and the capabilities. Okay. Abel means breath.
She's showing me that, like I can read that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a long way away to read that tiny lettering.
That
Okay. So, interestingly enough, it says in verse 3, they said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." So they used bricks instead of stone, and they used tar for mortar. This means they can build a lot bigger object much faster. This is
because they're not harvesting stone.
Yeah, this
They're
is quite a
making
significant
improvement.
They are burning mud to make into bricks, using tar for mortar, so they can build anything and build it faster and build it with fewer resources. They don't have to chase down and have specific rocks that they cut down or trim to be the right size, and they're not as limited. So they can do almost anything here. Then they said, now when the Bible says this, when the Hebrew, it implies, do you remember what it implies? If it says they said this, and without any reasoning, they say, then they said, we read that as they said this, and then they went on and said this.
Well, because it says they said, and then there is no like noun or pronoun saying anything.
Right.
So you just assume that it's still they.
Right. And
right?
It is still they.
Yeah.
But when?
We don't know.
So in the Hebrew, it implies another conversation, that there was a significant pause where we would read it. If we wrote this, we don't get that concept in English.
No.
When in English, if we would say, Chelsea said blah, 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 blah. Then she said.
Meaning like it happened right after.
Meaning like, yes. When she got done saying that, she went on to say this.
But what they mean is she said this, and then a few months later,
Yeah.
or some time ago, or not some time had passed.
Right. So they're saying this is making the statement in the Hebrew. What you're getting is, this is the statement that came from the people at Babel. And that was the end of that conversation. That was the end of that declaration.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, at a different time, they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. So just like Lauren was talking about just now, this is the people of Israel, or the people of Babel, going, okay.
Hold on a minute.
This is our intention. I know this is what you want from me. And this is the declaration of God to Cain. He said, hey, just because your sacrifice wasn't preferred today doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. If you'll do what's right, you're still going to be pleasing. But be careful, because sin is crouching at your door.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, and so he gives him a warning. Don't let desire lead you into the destruction of yourself and your brother.
Right.
But what did Cain do?
Oh, he totally got mad.
So the people of Babel are from the offspring of Noah. And after the flood, they have been commanded to do what?
To spread across the earth.
To fill up the earth, to spread out and multiply. And as they're in this process, they figure out how to make bricks. And they realize, hey, we can make whatever we want. And then, here's what's interesting. God had no problem with them making bricks.
Right.
Because God didn't interject. So God isn't scared of what they're capable of. Because in many ways, He was the reason. It was the work of the Holy Spirit that's the reason that they had the insight to even make the brick in the first place. Right?
Right.
So then now they're capable of making a brick. They understand that they can use tar for mortar. And then the next thing they say is, well, let's just make a city here for all of us to stay in, and we'll build a tower that's so high, and that's what we're going to be known for, a tower that stretches to the heavens, so everybody knows this is the place to be.
I mean, had they just stopped at let's build a city, that might have been okay.
I don't know, though.
I mean, I don't know either, because not everybody's going to want to live there.
Isn't
Especially not if there's not a really cool tower.
Right, but isn't that the act of rebellion? That they're fighting against the mission that God has for them? because they're focused on them instead of God?
I mean, yeah.
Like, that's the challenge here. This is the nature of people.
Right.
This is the point of the preface, the point of the story, the point of why do we need to have an individualized personal relationship with God? Why is it so important that He choose us? Why is it so important that He do so much for us, that He make a way for us? Because even after God rescues us and brings us to a place of promise and provision and extra and does all the things, we still fight this nature of selfishness. We still fight this nature of selfishness. And this is what this story is really centered around. There's actually a chiasm in here. And the center of it,
I just giggled because what's a chiasm?
a chiasm, it is a
Never
literary
heard of
tool.
that.
Is a literary
Man.
tool used in mostly poetry that has bookends and comes to a center.
So there's yet another one?
So there is yet another
Wow.
chiasm. And the opening stanza of that chiasm is
These were the families of the sons of Noah?
1032.
Is that why we started there?
They were spread out
Yeah.
over the entire earth. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth.
Which one was that?
That would be verse 9.
11:9.
Uh-huh.
So it's really not very big.
Nope, it's not. And the center of it. And this is a pretty hard one to actually find. Those are in the English, that's the only two places you're actually going to see it. It's transliterated. So in the Hebrew, you're going to see these Hebrew letters. In the Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, which is what this would be written in, there are no vowels, only consonants.
Right.
And it's the context of those consonants that give you the guttural sounds that would be the vowels that would go along with it. And it actually has a very a pattern to those consonants. And then at a certain point, which is verse 4 in this, once you get to verse 5, the order of those flip and they finish out in reverse order. And so that's where you find that center point being at verse 4. And the center point, the focus of the story is revealed in that. And it is it says, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the earth. And so the beginning, the bookends are talking about being spread or scattered over the whole earth, and the very center is being scattered over the whole earth. The whole point of this is being scattered over the whole earth. That is the point. That is the intention of this story. And it's easy for us to look at it. We often look at this and we go, oh, it's the Tower of Babel. People were trying to get to God. But that's not what it is. People were trying to be God, to be the source.
To be the center.
To be the center.
Yeah.
They were not willing to do what? They weren't willing to be scattered. But going back to our very first introduction to what God's intention was and the importance of Sabbath, they weren't willing to do what?
To stop.
They weren't willing to trust the story.
Oh, bummer. Trust the story.
They weren't willing to trust the story. They were not willing to trust God in His role of leadership over them. They just were not willing to do it because God had given them intention to do something. And they're like, you know what? I've got a better idea. How about I make a city where I'm the center of attention and I'll build this really big tower because I can.
So everybody can find us.
So everybody can find us. So that's the name for us. That's the focus. And that's the challenge. That is the main challenge that God has with people.
Their selfishness.
Their selfishness and their being the center point and the focus. And this is about the point in the story that if you've just been through the last 6 weeks with us and you've been through these stories and you really understand these stories of God made it and it was good and He encouraged us to just rest and trust His story and know that His intention and His work was good and He is working all things for the good of those who love Him or called according to His purpose, as the New Testament tells us, right? Like, God is good. I can trust the story. And then man shows up in the garden and messes it all up. And desire has entered the story. And then from desire entering the story, desire overcomes us and leads us to destroying other people, destroying the image of God. Then we get to the story of Noah, and the whole earth now is corrupted. The whole earth is focused on evil all the time.
There's not one man with good in his heart.
Not one. And now God saves it and starts over, goes back over this process, and wouldn't you know it, first rattle out of the box, man messes it up again. Like, still, like, we are on a path of, like, is there no redemption here?
Well,
This is a good spot to almost lose hope. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I was thinking of, like, the Lord said, there's no one good.
No
one. And that means not even Noah and his family were good. They may have been better.
But Noah found favor.
Yeah, it's not that he was awesome or inherently good. He just found favor.
Right.
So there was still sin, obviously.
And this is where it's such an interesting thing. Like, we're 11 chapters into the first book of the Bible.
I feel like we've covered a lot.
And it is, and again, we reference this as the preface. This is just setting the stage for
precursor.
Let us know, what is this book about? What this book is about is God's love is good, and His attention is good, and He is patient and loving and kind, and we continually mess it up.
Right.
We continually get in the way. We have a hard time trusting who God is and allowing Him to do the right thing. And so, about this time, like, is there hope for humanity?
At this time?
Yeah. Like, is there, how can we go about our life and not repeat the same thing? How can we is there a way to be different than this story has been so far on the human side? Not on the God side, but on the human side. Because God knows when to say enough. And obviously, people struggle with that.
Right.
Cain didn't know when to say enough because he went to kill his brother. Adam and Eve didn't know when to say enough because God said, hey, you can have anything except for this. And that's the one thing that they ended up eating. God has given Noah and his family run of the entire earth. And hardship falls on Noah. And Noah doesn't know when to stop cursing. And now here we are at the Tower of Babel, and God has given them an understanding of how to build and be safe as they're spreading out over all the earth, and they rebel against God, and they don't know when to stop advancing in technology. Because just like a phone or a computer, great technology stuff, great tools, can be used for very good things, but there's so much danger because people go too far. And that's a great place for us to lead into our discussion time. We're going to be back next week. We're going to be introduced to a guy.
I'm super pumped about it. I'm ready to get to him.
Yeah. We're going to be introduced to a guy.
It's where the story kind of slows down, I feel like.
We're going to go from the preface to the introduction. And
Yeah.
we're going to be introduced specifically to a
Who'd
family.
you say?
Avram, yeah,
That's
Abram.
correct.
He enters the story in Genesis 12, and that's where we're going to be.
Well,
next week,
technically
so
in Genesis 11, but
I guess his name is in Genesis 11. Yeah. So join us next week as we continue that. If you're not part of our group, come and join us.
what'd you say?
Discussion groups are so important for us to continue to have a conversation.
Join us next week, he said.
Yeah. Very good. So we love you guys. Have a great week. And come and join us next week or Sunday morning at 10:30.